I think accommodation is still the thing I struggle with most.
You have to decide on the balance between safety and your finances.
Okay, I did do a homestay on the lake with a family. Highly recommend. That was a transformative experience.
Try a co-live. As I said, you can do anything for a month.
Host a sister, I think that I've met so many wonderful ladies through that group.
So for home shopping, I use home exchange mostly, is the main one, the one that got me into this world and changed my life completely too.
Welcome to the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I'm your host, Jolene on the Go, solo female traveler and creative entrepreneur. Think of me as your skydive instructor, empowering you to take the leap into solo travel to push past your fears and transform your life. Join me every Tuesday as we explore the world of solo travel with purpose and discover how you can use it for your personal transformation, learn how to make meaningful connections around the world, and reignite your spirit of play. We aren't just talking about traveling to find ourselves anymore. We're all about doing the work to understand who we authentically are, breaking through our limiting beliefs, and taking the leaps to manifest lives we are excited about. Through interviews, solo episodes, meditations, each episode is packed with practical tips, strategies, and inspiring stories from guests who have transformed their lives through solo travel. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out on your journey, the Travel Not to Escape podcast is here to inspire and empower you to solo travel with purpose. Strap on your helmet. We're about to jump headfirst into the journey of a lifetime. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, navigators, and welcome to another episode of Travel Not to Escape. In season 1, we had the chance to chat with over 30 inspiring women who have changed their lives through solo travel. And they had so many amazing tips to provide. So I have compiled today all of the tips they had in regards to where to stay as a solo female traveler. And as a woman traveling, finding the right accommodation can make a huge difference to your overall experience. It can give you that extra sense of comfort and security, especially when you're traveling the world on your own. And whether you are an adventure seeker, you've done this a lot, or you're new to traveling, or if you're traveling on a budget, or you're a bougie traveler, the accommodations that you choose is based on your personal preferences and your expectations, but it can make your journey more interesting. It can really influence your feelings of comfort on this journey, and it can honestly make or break the trip if you are in an accommodation that is maybe not so desirable. So in today's episode, I've gathered all of the advice from 6 of our past guests, and we're going to be talking about different types of accommodations today. So we are hearing from avid solo female travelers and or digital nomads, and we're chatting about homestays in Guatemala, home exchanges in Costa Rica, doing host to sister and getting hosted, bougie versus budget accommodations. We're going to chat about co-livings and meeting new people there, as well as factoring in sustainability into your accommodation choices and what things you should be considering from a sustainability angle. But before we dive in, I do want to remind you all about my free play personality quiz I have on travelnottoescape.com/play. It's a quick 5-question test, and that'll tell you what your play personality is, which is a question in the discussion we have in every episode. So if you haven't yet, head over to travelnottoescape.com/play, and I'll give you, after you take that quiz, what your play personality is and a list of activities that you can do while you're traveling so you can make meaningful connections around the world as well. So again, head over and take that quiz. Now let's jump into today's episode. Where to stay as a solo female traveler. This first share is from our guest, Kristen Vieira, episode 22, if you want to listen to her full interview. Kristen is a remote work and lifestyle coach and digital nomad. So if you are considering becoming a digital nomad or wanting to explore the world of remote work, Kristen's going to be your girl, and she'll help you figure out what type of remote work is in most alignment with what skills you have and the type of lifestyle that you're wanting to create for yourself, and also helping you through the digital nomad lifestyle, because remote work and travel at the same time has its own challenges, let's just say. So definitely listen to her full episode. And this particular clip, she's sharing specifically a transformative moment in the beginning of her journey when she first started out in Guatemala. And she stayed in a homestay on Lake Atitlan. So let's listen to what Kristen has to say about that experience.
So my one-way ticket was to Lake Atitlan, very popular now for many, and it's beautiful. And it was Antigua de Lake Atitlan, but my first destination was the lake. And okay, I did do a homestay on the lake with a family. Highly recommend this. Staying with a family, learning Spanish. That was a transformative experience in itself because you become a part and see the family's day to day, and they treat you like part of their family. And I never forget this. One of my aha moments was being with that family at a dinner table. No phone, just pure conversation and presence. And the dad, so genuinely interested in hearing what the daughter learned at school that day, asking about her music and the interaction and the love between the family members without any technology, just being so present and living with them in my room, being super minimalistic, the extreme of minimalism, and just being so content. So just seeing how their family operated and really seeing how much presence was with all of them and how much joy to seeing the daughter and how much joy she got sharing about her day and how they included me too as a foreigner here for a few weeks. And then spending time with them it made me reevaluate a lot of things about where time and energy, how much we use technology, just all of the materialistic things that I use on a day-to-day that I didn't need during that time. And then the language piece was amazing too, practicing with them.
This is such a beautiful moment that Kristen shared, and being able to have that exchange with that family, be able to observe the present moment with them and also their appreciation for it and how close their family was because of the fact that Wi-Fi technology, they were more disconnected. And that's such a rare glimpse that you can have into a culture, into a family. And by staying in these homestays, not only are you able to disconnect from maybe the more touristy sides of the city and really understand the culture, but you have these beautiful moments and you're also able to exchange in language, helping the family out and them helping you out in terms of language. I love these types of stays, and it's good to add them in if you are really creating that type of connection. I think it's really important to add these types of accommodations into your maybe rotation. If it's something that you haven't thought of before, definitely look into it. There are language schools online that offer different language exchanges. You can look into Workaway, or even something as simple as doing a shared Airbnb. If you're staying in a homestay that is also an Airbnb, a lot, for example, in Bali, we'll have it where the family compound rents out a room and then you're able to have your own room and accommodations, but also be able to participate in the goings-on of the family and the community. I actually stayed in a similar type of environment when I was in Bali for the last couple of months of my trip. And I stayed on a family compound and I had my own room on their compound. But it was really beautiful because they would bring me breakfast every morning. And when they would do their ceremonies, they would also have my altars lit and give me offerings and explain to me what because there's a lot of ceremonies in Bali. So they would explain to me what some of the ceremonies were, and I would pet their dog. And it was part of being a family staying in these homestays. So definitely think about it, especially if you're traveling for a longer term or you want a little bit more of a authentic experience, or if you are wanting to also contribute to the local community in that type of exchange. So our next clip is Adriana, who is a corporate and business consultant and also the founder of Nomad Lighthouse, and has also hosted her own retreats, especially in Malta, which is where her base is. And she shares about her unique way of traveling by utilizing her home base in Malta on home exchange platforms. And she's done this in many countries, and she's going to talk about her process of doing this, as well as giving us advice on specific platforms she uses and why. So let's dive in.
Okay. So for home shopping, I use home exchange mostly, is the main one, the one that got me into this world and changed my life completely too. It's homeexchange.com. And basically, they have houses all around the world, houses, apartments, kitchenette, everything, all the sizes, all locations. And there are two ways of exchanging. So you either exchange one-to-one simultaneously. So let's say I want to go to your home, you want to come to my home, and we do this simultaneously. It doesn't matter the size of the house. If we agree, we can exchange. Or if you say, okay, my house is too big, I don't want to exchange one-to-one, or maybe you want to go to a different location, you don't want to come to my home, you can pay with guest points. And then these points, the person that is getting paid can use those points to book another place as if it was an Airbnb, but without money involved. It's only points. And the way to get points is hosting people in your home.
And is it they have full access to your whole house without you, or is it a combination of them also staying with you in a room?
Up to you. So you can do that with a room as well, similar to the couchsurfing setup, right? So if you have just a room or an area in your house that you want to let someone there while you are in the house, you have to specify that. They call this hospitality exchange. Obviously, you get less points because it's not the full house. Most of the exchanges I have done, actually all the exchanges I have done so far, they are full houses.
And where have you been so far through this type of change?
Costa Rica itself. So I traveled there, even in my home country in Brazil, because by the time I had some issues where my family had some health issues. And then I had to have a separate place to have my calls at 5 a.m. I stayed also in Brazil with a home exchange. I have already home exchanges booked for this year for Bulgaria for the Nomad Festival, Tarifa in Spain, and Vancouver in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how long do you stay? Is it just dependent on what the availability is for that particular place? And do you have to have a home to exchange in order to be able to be in the
You don't need to own the home, but you need to have a base, right? So it could be even a rented place as long as your landlord agrees to that. So you can use your rented place. I don't know how they consider that. In some countries might be considered illegal, but if your landlord is okay with that, I know plenty of people that they use their rented homes to do home exchange. And how long it lasts, it also depends on the people. From my experience here in Malta, because it's like a kind of a holiday destination for European families, so many people come here for maximum a week. 3 days to 7 days mostly. Yeah. But when I travel, because I'm a nomad, I like to stay longer. And basically I want to stay at least 1 month to get acquainted to the place and not to have to rush from one place to another all the time. I'm trying to stay minimum 1 month, but normally more. And it's a bit harder to get because, of course, many people, they just have vacation once a year and they just travel for a week, something like that. So my strategy for that is to find the people who have second homes. So in home exchange, you have a filter. So you can find holiday homes, and usually people don't spend much time there. So it's easier to get accepted for a longer period of time there. But now there is a new platform that I just joined. It's called Nomad. It's the same concept, but it's just for digital nomads. It's exactly, yeah, it's a home exchange platform for digital nomads. So all the places are guaranteed to have Wi-Fi and a desk for you to work because it's from nomads to nomads. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yes, it's a new one. They still don't have as many options as home exchange, of course, but it's easier to get for longer periods of time. But last year, I forgot to mention, I actually stayed in France quite a while, also in different cities for a month in different places. So I was 1 month in Paris, 1 month in Provence, and in different regions. And for those places, I normally exchanged with second homes or retired people because they have also flexibility to travel. So this lady I exchanged with in Marseille in France, she was by the time going to the United States. So she used the points. I paid her for 1 month and then she used those points to book her trip.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love that that works out. So do you mainly plan your travels around being able to home swap?
No, actually the opposite. Normally what I'm doing, because to be honest, the offer is quite wide in this website. So I normally plan my trip anyways, and then I see if I can find a home swap in that period of time. Yeah. If I cannot, then I book an Airbnb or a combination of maybe a week in home swap and then something else. But honestly, last few times I didn't need to. It's actually easier to get a home swap when you have exact dates because then people can give you a definitive answer.
That
Mhm.
makes sense. There's actually another home swap. I don't know if you have looked into it. It's called Kindred, and I think
No,
maybe they're more
no.
in the US, but similar structure of getting the points if you're hosting versus doing a exact swap. So could be
Yeah.
another option. I love that there's more and more of these types of options because it also
Yes.
enables the nomads that have a base or even just people who have vacations and don't know how to be able to afford the
Exactly.
lodging in a place that they want to visit. I think this is really empowering for as an option for people. So
Exactly.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and actually, there's another one called People Like Us. It's similar to Home Exchange as well. And it has a very nice community. I joined the community on Facebook just to check the vibe before I joined the website, but it looks quite good. And in the Home Exchange, I received lots of single moms as well with their kids, which was really interesting because it's a way to save if you have to travel and stay with family. Sometimes it's very expensive, right? To go to a
Yeah.
hotel, especially if you have kids. This is a way also to save on accommodation and stay under the same roof, everybody.
Anna gave so many great tips for home exchanges. And as you could tell, I asked a lot of questions because this is an area that was new for me and is new for me. I haven't done a home exchange yet, particularly because I don't have a base. But I found it interesting for others who might have a apartment or a house that they have in their current city and want to be able to travel but don't want to pay both for their rent or their mortgage as well as the travel accommodations. Home Exchange, she named a bunch of platforms, so I think that's going to be a really great resource for you all. And personally, I've actually traveled and had accommodations in all different types of ways. So when I first started traveling, I was doing a lot of hostels because I was young and definitely doing more of that budget backpacking travel. And I also, at that point, didn't know how else to make friendships. But now that I know how to make friendships in every city and also need more privacy as well as stable Wi Fi, I do tend to use Airbnb. So what I'll do is I will use an Airbnb maybe for the first month or so, and then I will negotiate off of Airbnb if I decide that I like the city and I want to stay longer and I like that particular Airbnb, then I'll do some type of deal where I negotiate and pay them in cash because if you pay in cash, it's usually a lot cheaper, especially if you have a place like Argentina, for example, where a lot of people really wanted US dollars. So definitely look into that option. I know that Airbnb, again, we're going to talk about it when we have a clip later on about sustainability, and we'll dive into this topic a little bit more. I've also stayed in short-term rental places that are offered in the US. So when I was first nomading, I stayed in New Orleans for 3 months, for example, and I utilized a platform called Sonder. So they are their own company and they have leases within certain buildings around the US and actually also Europe and a number of places now. But you are able to stay there, and it's great because they're specifically meant for short-term leases and they are set up so that the Wi-Fi is stable, they have nice furniture, and it's a really comfortable accommodations. And you bypass a lot of the cities that have very strict Airbnb laws because technically they are set up for short-term rentals, but it's not as if it's individual owners, it's a specific company that owns it. Another thing that I've done is I actually quite love staying with friends when I'm back in town, especially in the US. And I like to do a best friend trip whenever I'm back in the US and I will stay with friends and it gives me that close bonding time that I miss when I'm abroad. So I will take turns visiting friends around the US and staying with them. And sometimes those down moments, actually most times those down moments are my favorite part of the visit. So it's a bit of a balance in what I do. I've also started staying in co-livings recently, and I stayed in a co-living in Bali where I wanted something that had the Wi-Fi set up. I wanted a bit more social of an environment with events going on and something where I could just go and I knew that all the amenities were catered for someone in my demographic, digital nomad, remote worker, and had the things that I needed. So we're going to chat about co-livings now with our next guest, and that is Meg. If you want to listen to her full episode, she's episode 20, and she chats about nomad life and balancing her career in corporate sales. So Meg is actually one of my best friends, and when we first started nomading back in So I left in 2020, and in 2021, I was like, hey, you want to not renew your lease and join me? And so we ended up doing nomading in the US together and went to Louisville. We went to Nashville and we stayed in Airbnbs while we were there. We ended up down in Puerto Vallarta, and that's when I ended up staying in Mexico for longer. And she continued on to bouncing around the world herself. But she actually started doing co-livings, especially when she was in Mexico and in South Africa. And that prior to that, I wasn't doing a lot of it. And she was actually my source of inspiration for, okay, these are normal. They seem legit. She seems to like it. She's connected with some good people through it. Let me give it a shot. So let's listen to her chat about her experience on co-lives.
Not the type of person that will say, oh, I'm only going to live in co-lives or I'm only going to live solo. I think it just depends on what you are needing. So how did you hear about Outsite? I had just done some research and I really liked their branding. And I also looked at reviews. So to me, that was such a fun experience. I had just been back in the States for a month and was just like, I need to get away. This was a little draining and I needed some me time, but also knowing where I was going in Mexico wasn't like a huge digital nomad hub. So I was like, let me just try a co-live. As I said, you can do anything for a month. You can set routine. So I was like, I can co-live for a month. I did my research. You have a desk in your room and your bedroom. I knew I had private space. And it ended up being so much fun. There was some people who were staying there for almost the whole month. There were some people just in and out for a week. But for me, it ended up being a good time because there was an instant community. And there were some people you liked right away. Some you were just, nah. I can't say there was anyone that I was like, I don't like this person. I don't want to be around them. So that I think was fortunate. But then it was cool where you're just like a music showcase thing, like to the guys that's just like, hey, this seems like something your interest. I found it. Do you want to go? And they were like, yeah, we're all in. And so there's this niceness of having an immediate community to just feel like, I'm doing this. Do you want to go with? I wouldn't go about it of just saying, who's doing stuff? Can I come along? Or I'll go to this if y'all want to go to this. Like still have your independent mindset of I'm going to go do this. And see who wants to join and partake. And then you just end up with cool experiences. Some will be a part of your life and some are just meant to be there for that moment. But I don't have a bad thing to say about it.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's not like what I was thinking, which was more of a hostel style, right? Because at this point, we're not doing hostels.
If anyone knows me, I am not a hostel girly at any age of my life. Let's be real.
Yeah, but it's nice if you have your private room. And in all honesty, like when you're traveling, you're not cooking a lot. And I know you and your girl dinners.
The goddess of girl dinner over here. That's been my whole life. It's how I eat. Blueberries and cold brew coffee all the way.
Yeah, so if you don't mind not having the kitchen, or maybe there is a kitchen, but not necessarily having like a private kitchen, it's nice to have a private room, have the constant Wi-Fi, and as you mentioned, the instant community, because then, yeah, you don't have to build that up. And I am building a course to help women how to make connections without using co-lives, but co-lives are great as well if you're wanting to be around like-minded people that are also working remotely, that are in that same area, and is an avenue that you can use that is built in for you, which is nice when it's available.
Yeah, and if there's a kitchen there, I think there's a benefit to that. No surprise to anyone that knows me or anyone watching. We are not a chef over here. We do not. When we cook, it is very minimal. I am the one responsible for wine and making sure everyone's wine glass is full and the conversation's great. But what I see is the kitchen always becomes a communal space. And it's a great way to just talk. And then also there are some people like I know you like love like cooking and sharing experiences. And a lot of my friends, like shocking, a lot of my friends do like to cook and they love to share their food. It's a good way to talk to people. And if some people are passionate about cooking, it's like the childhood question is like you get to see them light up, and not in this professional sense or that it's just something that like brings them joy. And that's a really cool experience to have with some people who are strangers or some that become friends.
So you can understand why I was converted to being open to co-lives after talking with Meg, because she really just sold me on the fact that sometimes you're not going to want to put in a lot of effort to be social, especially if you're only somewhere for a shorter amount of time, say like a month or less than 2 months, really. It's harder to build long-lasting community. So in those cases, you do want to set your expectations for, hey, I want to have already an established community or group that I can tap into immediately upon landing, and co-lives do serve
as a really good source for that connection and community if you're in a spot for a short time or in a spot where there's not a large community that's already established for the groups that you're looking for. So say, for example, if you are a digital nomad and you're looking for a hub and it's not really in that city, or if you have identified that, say, you're a kinesthetic play personality and you always tap into dance communities, but the place that you're going to, so for some reason doesn't have a dance community, then you're like, oh, okay, my usual go-tos aren't here. Maybe I'll put myself in a more social environment and go to a co-live. And she also brings up the point that you have these natural moments with people, especially around cooking, for example, where you have these more downtime moments where you're not necessarily going out or doing an activity, but you have the camaraderie and the people around you and you're connecting over food. Connecting over food is one of my favorite ways to connect. So it puts you in that situation where you do have those moments for conversation that are deeper. Speaking of connection and accommodations combined, our next clip is Marilisa, episode 11, if you want to dive into her background and her story of transformation. In this clip, she shares about her trip in Europe and how transformational it was for her and the people that she met. And she utilized her resources in order to make connections and also find accommodation all in one and using Host Sister, which is a great platform that I also recommend because you have a lot of women on there who are local to their cities or also visiting different cities and connecting with each other, hosting them in spare rooms or couches, or maybe not even hosting them if you already have a place, but at least meeting you up while you're in town and showing you around or having a meal with you or some type of activity where you bond. And that's a great way to make friends. Also a great way if you are needing accommodation, especially accommodation in a pinch. It's a great resource. And I've seen a lot of women who have been in, say, sticky accommodation situations where things fell through last minute or the place wasn't as expected or there was something that maybe last minute came up that gave them some pause from a security and comfort level. Then they'll post on Host a Sister, and a lot of people step up to the plate in these cities and really are there for their sisters. So it's really beautiful to see. So let's listen to Marilisa and her take.
Using resources that are available online. Host a Sister, as you previously mentioned, has been a huge one. I think that I've met so many wonderful ladies through that group. I've got to be hosted by two of them during this trip. And one of my very close friends, Ava, who I met here in Argentina through Host a Sister. And then we spent a whole week together in Montenegro. And then I visited her in Austria. It was through that group. So I think, one, not being afraid to reaching out. I think in hostels, you'll see a lot of females traveling. That's one thing that I noticed. There are more females solo traveling than men. That girl that's on your room and looks super nice or is on the kitchen, she might have been at that country that you're planning to go next, or she could be your potential partner in crime for that trip that you want to do, that visit to a museum, a national park, whatever you want to do. And also using resources such as Host a Sister. There are so many others, but I think Host a Sister has been a big one for me.
And I love the fact that I always see as well, Marilisa is the first one on there on Host a Sister. Whenever someone mentions going to Buenos Aires and wanting to connect with people, she's on there and it's, yes, come, I'll meet and we'll go out. And she's just so friendly and welcoming in her own city. And that type of energy really attracts just the best people. So that's such a great resource for you to connect or find potential accommodations. She also mentions hostels. Again, hostels are the accommodation that's the most typically well known for solo travelers. It's a bit of an entry point, I would say, if you are just starting out in the journey. While I'm not using hostels at the moment, I will say that it's an experience I'm glad I've had. And when you are first starting out, it's good to dive in because you have a lot of people that are having that thirst for travel at the same speed that you're wanting. I found a lot of people that you'll meet in hostels are doing a lot faster travels. And so you will meet people really quickly and you guys are going to do a ton of things together. And there's always activities, always events, a lot of things going on. So it is also a great option, a great budget-friendly option as well, if that is something that you were excited for. So we're presenting a whole range of different types of accommodations here. You can do the homestay, you can do the Airbnb and having your own apartment or a hotel or co-live or be hosted in someone's house through host a sister or staying in a hostel. There's so many different options, and I want to present the range for you because it really depends on what city you're going to, what you're needing out of the experience, your particular comfort level and experience in solo traveling, and yeah, just how you feel in the moment. I change it up. All of these, as you've heard, all these guests change it up depending on where they're going and how they're feeling as well. So you just have to listen to what you are needing and go for it. And on that same topic, let's listen to Nika, episode 37. And she's also on Instagram as Traveling with Nika and has her own travel guide with 100 plus practical travel tips, hacks, and strategies. So as part of her advice, I love that she really emphasizes balanced travel, and she will talk about budget travel and also bougie travel and everything in between, but really understanding what's going to be the best for you and your comfort level, what's going to be the best for that city, and also financially, what are the options. So let's listen to her clip because I found it very useful. And I think you will too.
Yeah. So one of the things I would say is I did book a very central hotel accommodation. So that really helped me to feel comfortable with at least being in the city center. So I felt like I was able to walk to things just comfortably. If I was trying to say, okay, I was exhausted for the day, or maybe I just didn't like an experience, maybe at a restaurant or something like that, I knew that I could easily just go back to my hotel because it was nearby. That also had saved me on costs from maybe doing a rental car or a lot of Ubers because I was able to be in that central area and I could walk to a lot of the things that I did have planned. So I think that was definitely helpful in my preparation for that solo trip, because one of the things I don't recommend for beginner solo travelers, I would say people who are maybe just getting started, maybe they do a few things in their hometown and they want to actually take a trip and take the leap. You have to decide on the balance between safety and your finances. If you have to compromise your safety, then I don't think that you should take that trip. I think you should wait to be able to maybe save up a little bit more or find ways where you can still have a more comfortable and also affordable accommodations, but it doesn't compromise your safety. So just finding that balance. I wouldn't recommend for individuals to start solo traveling, women to start solo traveling without also considering their safety being top priority. One of the things for me when it comes to balanced travel, a lot of people think that travel has to be black and white, and it's either you're a budget traveler or you're a luxury traveler when it comes to the finance aspect of it. But I think for me, it really depends on the trip. I'm where I would find ways to save probably on every single trip, but then there are other trips where I'm willing to spend a little bit more to get the experience that I want to have. So whether that's doing certain activities or staying in certain hotels or accommodations, I will not compromise on that. But then for other trips, I might say, you know what, actually, let me choose this activity instead because I'm not so pressed about doing zip lining. So let me do another activity that's still fun, but is more affordable.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It depends on where you're going. I think that's such an underrated comment. Because I think when you're on social media, I think you see only the beautiful photos and it looks lavish. It looks like, oh, it's so bright and colorful and bougie. Maybe I took a bus to get there. Or maybe I'm staying with a local instead. And the main part of that experience that I wanted to splurge on was the activity and not necessarily accommodation or the transportation. So you can be bougie in one area and not so bougie in the other versus have everything be completely luxe or the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say when it comes to travel. So there would be sometimes, let's say I'm visiting a certain US state. I may have family there or a friend there. So instead of maybe me splurging on an expensive hotel, and if it's a very short trip, I may say, you know what, I'll just save money there and I don't have a problem with visiting my friend because they wanted me to come in town. Versus, oh, I paid for a hotel in New York City, for example. I have family that lives in New York.
It's wild. Yeah.
It's very comfortable accommodations for me. So I may say, yes, I'm going to New York, but I may not say, oh, but I'm not staying in Times Square. So it doesn't make that travel experience any less or any better than anyone else's New York travel experience. It just means that's what I chose to do for that time.
Exactly. And there's definitely time for the full bougie type of experiences and other times where it's a bit of a balance or one or the other. But yeah, I feel the same way about New York. $500 a night for a hotel room is
I'm not going to do it. I have not. Yeah. And I think, as I said, just all about balanced travel. If maybe New York is your bucket list destination and you really want to have the complete city experience, you may then opt to say, hey, I'm going all out. I'm doing the Times Square hotel. I'm doing all of that.
I told you she had so many great just tips and overall advice, specifically if you are new to solo traveling. Her point regarding making sure that you have enough funds to have the comfort level in the accommodations, because I think that's something that a lot of people may not necessarily grasp if you haven't gone on a solo travel trip yet. It's very tempting to save as much money from the accommodations, staying in a hostel, for example, which, as I mentioned, is a great option if you are starting out. But the locations for a lot of hostels might be further out from the city center. For example, when I went to Rome, a lot of the hostels in Rome are near the train station, and the train station area isn't as, let's say, populated when at night. It's also further away from a lot of the more touristy areas. So just not the safest location for you to go in and out of, especially at night. So if you think about that as an option versus paying more and staying closer to the city or staying closer to where there's a lot more things happening, or if you want to enjoy the nightlife, then yes, you might want to wait a little bit longer so that you have the funds available to then be able to spend on the accommodation that's going to be closer to the city center and save money on potentially having to Uber or take transportation that's going to also put you in some vulnerable positions. So it is a balance between the accommodation and your funds and your comfort level and really understanding where you are in all of that. I do have a free resource as well to provide you all, and that's the Solo Travel Workbook. So if you head to travelnottoscape.com/go, you can download this free workbook, and it's a list of all the questions that you can ask yourself to understand where you are in your solo travel confidence. So for example, if you are very new, haven't traveled before, first time in the country, don't speak the language, and have already some apprehension, then this is when I would probably recommend for you to have a little bit more fun so that you can stay closer to the city center where it would be safer and have more accessibility to places that you want to walk around in, maybe cafes or restaurants, so that you're not necessarily having to travel back and forth. Because when you travel back and forth, you also have to pack for the day. And that means you're carrying a lot more objects, maybe a bigger backpack or a purse on you than you normally would have if you were closer to the city center and can pop in and out in between tours or in between activities. You have to consider being a target with the amount of things that you're carrying on you as well and looking like a tourist. So just another thing to think about. And Nika also mentioned the balance between what is it that you want to do for that trip. So if New York is your bucket list destination and you really want to go all out, I have a friend who actually has New York as a goal to give to her sister as a celebration gift. And when they're going to go, it's going to be all out, and they're going to go, see shows on Broadway and go to all the best restaurants and stay in like the best hotels. And so that itself is part of the experience. Versus if you really want to do another type of travel, or maybe your focus is not necessarily centered on the experience. Maybe you're only going to be in that lodging for just the night's stay, and the majority of the time you're going to be spending hiking, for example, and outdoors. Then yeah, maybe it's not as important to you or as part of the experience to stay in a location that is private. Moral of the story, really understand what your intentions are for the trip, your comfort level, and what it is that you're trying to get out of the experience, and that will help you understand what type of accommodation is going to be best for that particular situation. So now let's dive into our last clip, and this is with Lotte, and her episode is 32 if you all want to dive into all things sustainable travel, and her Instagram is a sustainable travel guide. She has amazing tips and also ways to gamify sustainable travel, so it's a little bit more understandable for people that are just getting in and just trying to understand how do you travel more sustainably. And as we were talking during her episode, I was trying to get some more information on like how do you choose accommodation that is sustainable. It's something that is quite difficult, especially with the options that are out there and the monopolies that a lot of these booking platforms have. And she goes into that. And she also dives into a few options and a few considerations to think about. And honestly, I'm not perfect with this. I am just starting to really consider my own impacts when it comes to travel and sustainability and impact within the local communities, and trying to really just be intentional and aware of my actions and how that affects the places that I'm entering and the choices that I'm making, and how all of that really is intertwined. I feel my stance on it is we're not starting with the goal of perfection, but with the goal of awareness, understanding. So let's dive into the clip now.
I think accommodation is still the thing I struggle with most, because you have all these eco hotels and whatnot, but they're very expensive. So if you're traveling on a budget, or even it doesn't have to be a tight budget, but even wanting to spend less than £100 a night is already difficult if you want to stay like in an eco place. And I hadn't really realized that. Also to do with booking platforms. So booking.com and Airbnb have monopolies in their branch, which means they can ask quite high fees for the hotels and Bs that list on them. So it's really trying to find accommodation that also benefits the locals. So whether that be couch surfing or things like Airbnb, I think is a thing that is.
What's that one? What Airbnb?
Yeah, so it's basically Airbnb, but they invest part of their profit in local project, and they have more demands, I think, in terms of sustainability before a place gets listed on there. And they really try to have their profit go into the local community instead of just some CEO's wallet, basically. But these were all things that I didn't realize even when I started out thinking more about the sustainability of transport.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something that I think about a lot too. Staying in Airbnbs as I've been traveling is also the over tourism, the gentrification of the areas that I'm going, and they're driving up the cost for the local economy.
Yeah, exactly. That's another very big problem, and also quite hard to solve, especially in places that are also economically dependent on the tourism. So yeah, it's there. I don't think there's a straightforward solution. But if people become more aware of this, then hopefully that will be the first step to changing the system.
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot. It's okay if I want to live somewhere. And initially, Airbnb is like and then from there, I will typically negotiate off of Airbnb with the landlord. And in some cases, I've also asked them about their other properties and cut a more local deal, or ask also other locals that I meet, like, how much are you paying? Like, what's standard? Just so I know I'm not like insanely driving up costs in this area. But apart from that, what are other ways that you can make sure that you're staying somewhere that's not necessarily completely negatively impacting the local economy, but then also as I'm staying there, what are the things that I want to look for to make sure that the accommodations are also sustainable?
Yeah, so the big one is that they're locally owned, so that the place you're staying is not part of an international chain. is not owned by a foreign investor. And that can be a little bit hard to find out, but to do with Airbnbs, it often helps if you stay in a room in someone's house instead of renting the entire apartment or house. And basically search on places' websites and see what you can find out. Also, the number of rooms is often an indication. So the more rooms an hotel has, the less likely it is that it's being owned by, say, a family or some general locals. So these, I think, are a few ways to try and navigate this, but it is a tricky field.
I hope that last clip was insightful for you all. It definitely was a conversation that I loved having because, as I mentioned in the clip, it's something that I think about. What are my impacts as I'm traveling to these destinations? I want to make sure that I'm leaving it in a positive way and that I'm not just taking resources from a place that I'm wanting to see. I really want to leave with some connections and having contributed to a community and not negatively impacting them. And it's not a perfect thing at all. There's no set rules or actions, and a lot of it is just being aware and being conscious of what choices you're making and having these considerations that she lined out of, okay, who is this owned by? Is it a foreign investor where none of that money that you're spending, all of those costs that are driven up are actually going to the local community, or is it going towards people that actually live in that particular city or country that you are visiting? So these are just some examples of questions to consider in regards to sustainability, and just the tip of the iceberg. Definitely hop into her episode to listen to the rest. So we have covered so many different types of accommodations. We've had 6 different perspectives, starting with Kristen and the homestay in Guatemala. We dove into home exchanges with Adriana, co-living with Megan, and then hostess sister and hostels with Marilisa, balanced travel with Nika, and finally sustainable accommodations with Lotte. And there's, again, a whole host of things to consider when choosing the type of accommodations that you're going to stay in on your trip, or if you're going to do long-term travel. And I hope that this episode just gave you a bit more perspective on some options that you might not have considered initially. As I mentioned, your travels are going to be highly personal, and you want to make sure that you're confident and that you're putting yourself in some safe situations, and that you're intentional in the type of experience that you want to create for yourself. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I hope it helps you as you're planning your next trip. Again, a couple of the resources I mentioned throughout is the Play Personality Quiz. So if you're looking to find activities that light you up around the world where you can make meaningful friendships, and that's going to be particularly important if you're not going to be staying in a accommodation that is a co-live or hostel, for example, then you'll want to find activities in the cities in order to connect with people. So head to travelnotsescape.com/play to take your Play Personality Quiz and find out what activities you should do while you're traveling, and to ask yourself the right questions to be more confident in your solo travels and understand where you're starting from so that you can choose the type of accommodations that's going to match the intentionality of your trip. Then head to travelnotsescape.com/go and download the free Solo Travel Confidence Workbook. Thank you again, navigators, for joining in today's episode. If you have any additional questions on the types of accommodations or want us to highlight any additional types that we didn't highlight today, feel free to head to Travel Not to Escape's Instagram. That's at Travel Not to Escape. Send a DM, and I'm so excited to connect with you and hear what you have to say on there. Also, we have a Facebook group at Travel Not to Escape, so definitely join there and you will be able to chat with the rest of our community. Thanks again, and I will see you all in the next adventure.
Until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and playing, and safe travels, navigators.